The light of the true faith is fading. Heretics have taken our country. Nothing but a pack of fools and cowards. They shall receive a terrible blow this Parliament, and yet they shall not see who hurts them. Our message is clear. A dangerous disease requires a desperate remedy. For we shall give them something to remember. Remember, remember, the 5th of November. Gunpowder, treason, and plot.
After King James I came into power, Catholics waited with bated breath to see what would happen next. A recusing Catholic man named Thomas Percy was a cousin of Henry Percy, the 8th Earl of Northumberland. Even though he was not a lord himself, Percy was able to take it upon himself to request an audience with the king. He asked for mercy on behalf of English Catholics. Wanting to gain popularity with his new English subjects, James was vague and made sure not to make any promises. It was still very early in his reign, and he was not sure yet what he should do about the tensions between Protestants and Catholics. He essentially told Percy not to worry because he personally had no ill will towards Catholics. Percy believed that King James was going to offer some kind of relief and that he might be getting ready to repeal Queen Elizabeth I's laws. Percy was very happy about this, and he returned to tell his friends and family that they no longer had to worry about being persecuted for their faith. Some even hoped that maybe James would convert to Catholicism and that the entire country would revert back to practicing the one true faith. For about a year, English Catholics were able to live a normal life. James temporarily stopped collecting fees that recusant Catholics were required to pay for skipping the Protestant service. He also did not push for his guard to search Catholic homes for harboured priests. However, the laws made by Elizabeth I were kept in place. He had not repealed them because he was waiting to see what the reaction would be from his Protestant Parliament. In the summer of 1604, the members of Parliament they finally noticed that Catholics were not being persecuted anymore, and they began to push King James to come down hard on them. The way they felt about the Catholics was similar to communists in the Cold War. Many of them believed that if they were not stamped out, they would cause an uprising. So James brought back the same laws that Elizabeth I had put in place. Suddenly, Catholic homes were being searched once again, and they were being treated like criminals. The Catholic people in England, they had lived so long being oppressed, but the thing that triggered their anger was the false sense of hope. They felt betrayed by King James, and it was enough to make some want to kill him. Even though Guy Fawkes is the one who is most remembered for the gunpowder plot, the ringleader was actually a man named Robert Catesby. He began making plans in 1603 and first recruited a man named Thomas Winter. Catesby and Winter, they rode to Spain because they had associates who were Catholic there. Spain was also designated as the protector of the Catholic faith. Since Catholics were being persecuted once again, they begged for help from the Spanish to stop King James from killing their people. However, the Spanish, they were not interested in getting involved.
Denied.
Catesby and Winter, they returned to England and decided if they were going to find someone to help, it would have to be at home. The people they found were John Wright and Thomas Percy. Winter had gone to school with Guy Fawkes, and he seemed like the perfect candidate to help them out with the plot. After all, Fawkes had plenty of experience fighting in Spain, and he knew a lot about gunpowder. Fawkes was smart, and he knew how to stay cool under pressure. In May of 1604, the 5 men were spotted together at London's Duck and Drake Inn. They whispered about their plot, and they swore an oath of loyalty and secrecy. The group was biding their time, trying to figure out the finer details of the plan as time went on. Thomas Percy had the resources to purchase a property in London that was very close to the Palace of Westminster. Guy Fawkes began to live with him, posing as a footman named John Johnson. This way, they'd never seem out of the ordinary to anyone who witnessed them around town. At that time, it was not uncommon for men to buy gunpowder, especially if they planned to sail overseas. They needed the powder to use their guns and cannons and defend themselves from pirates. The only problem was that they'd need to buy small quantities over a long period of time in order to not raise suspicions. Guy Fawkes would use his connections to slowly gather a cache of gunpowder barrels that were left over from ships entering the harbour and bring them back to Thomas Percy. At the time, the Palace of Westminster had a collection of smaller buildings. Lords and members of the upper class would come and go from these buildings on a regular basis without being stopped by security. The rules were very relaxed, and it was actually easy for Thomas Percy to rent a storage space in the basement below the palace, claiming that it was for his cousin, the Earl of Northumberland, to store firewood for winter. The day of Parliament kept getting delayed, and the group of conspirators grew from 5 to 13 men. Unfortunately for them, though, the extended time, combined with the greater number of people who were being told about the plot, meant that it was far more likely that the secret was going to get out. A Catholic man named Lord Monteagle was preparing to be present at Parliament. A masked man handed a letter to one of Monteagle's servants, and it was presented to him immediately. It said, "My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have a care for your preservation. Therefore, I would advise you, as you tender your life, to devise some excuse to shift your attendance at this Parliament, for though there be no appearance of any stir, yet, I say, they shall receive a terrible blow." Even though it was late at night, Lord Monteagle quickly told his servants to ready the horses so that he could deliver the letter to Robert Cecil, the spymaster and Secretary of State to King James. Historians have debated over the theories of who actually wrote the anonymous letter. It could have been one of the 13 conspirators. It may even have been Monteagle himself writing a fake letter after hearing letters through the Catholic recusant grapevine. He was awarded £500 per year for his loyalty to the crown. Back then, that was a small fortune. Even more historians believe that it was Robert Cecil. He was the spymaster after all, and some believe that he knew about the gunpowder plot for a long time and orchestrated the entire scene to make himself seem like the hero. On the 4th of November, there was an extensive search of the Palace of Westminster. At first, they didn't find anything that concerned them, and they were beginning to believe that the letter was a hoax. But later that day, it was brought to the Royal Guard's attention that there were cellars underneath the palace that had not yet been searched. A royal official named Sir Thomas Knivett was told that one of them was being used for storing firewood, so he led a group of royal guards to search the area. When they arrived, they found Guy Fawkes guarding the firewood. Instead of wearing the clothes of a watchman, Fawkes was dressed in his riding boots, spurs, hat, and cloak as if he was getting ready to jump on a horse at any moment. They moved the wood piles aside to reveal 36 barrels of gunpowder. The royal guards searched him and found a box of long matches. Fawkes, he was immediately arrested. On November the 6th, King James wanted to meet Guy Fawkes face to face. He interviewed him, asking if he had any regret. He genuinely wanted to know how anyone could be so ruthless and be willing to kill so many people, even the young children who would have been present at Parliament. Fawkes said that his only regret was that his plan had failed. Fawkes still called himself John Johnson, and he refused to give up the names of his co-conspirators. King James ordered that Fawkes be tortured and interrogated. He was suspended by manacles and then put on the rack so that his arms and legs were stretched and popped out of their sockets. He eventually caved and gave his confession. In the before and after of his signature, we can see that he could hardly write his own name after enduring so much pain. While Guy Fawkes was being tortured, the rest of the conspirators, they were on the run. Robert Catesby began to announce to the villagers that King James was dead, and he called for the Catholics to rise up and reclaim their rightful place in the kingdom. They rode from town to town, but instead of the huge army he expected, there were only about 40 men who decided to follow him. Ironically, Catesby and his men, they accidentally blew themselves up with their own gunpowder that they'd brought with them. Without Guy Fawkes there to help them with his expertise, they thought that in order to dry out the damp, they should sprinkle their gunpowder in front of an open fireplace. It exploded, of course, and one of the men went blind. The rest were now burned and injured. One man asked Robert Catesby what they were going to do next. He replied, "We mean here to die." On November the 8th, the Sheriff of Warwickshire showed up with a small army of 200 men. There was a shootout between the two groups. The weakened Catholic men did their best to go out fighting, but it was clear that the King's Guard was going to overpower them. Robert Catesby was shot, but he crawled to the nearby chapel. He was found on the floor of the church, hugging a statue of the Virgin Mary. The men who were left alive were taken prisoner and sentenced to hang in the gallows along with Guy Fawkes.
Wales. King Charles III has visited the Vatican multiple times. He met with Pope Francis with his wife in 2017. And again in 2019.
Such a pleasure to see you.
The two were celebrating the canonization of the English saint John Henry Newman. The coronation of King Charles III will take place on May 6th.
Francis gives fragments believed to be from the true cross on which Jesus was crucified to form part of a new processional cross which will be used at the coronation of Britain's King Charles next month. The new cross was a gift from the King to the Church in Wales to mark its centenary in 2020. It features two small shards from the relic donated by the Pope, which have been shaped into a cross behind a rose crystal gemstone. The cross will lead the coronation procession at Westminster Abbey in London on May 6. After the coronation, the cross will be shared between the Anglican and Roman Catholic churches in Wales. As heir to the British throne, King Charles had the ancient title of Prince of Wales until he became king last September. His son and heir William is now Prince of Wales.
Not even pneumonia or cancer could prevent. Two heads of state, both leaders of their respective churches. Pope Francis hosting King Charles and Queen Camilla at the Vatican, offering a papal 20th wedding anniversary blessing. Camilla wearing her repurposed wedding dress for the occasion, and Charles speaking one of the romantic languages during his official duties.
20° anniversario di matrimonio.
The first British monarch to address both houses of Italian Parliament, underlining the two nations' shared democratic values. But despite the international uncertainty, the monarch was able to inject some humour into the historic address.
It was the Romans who gave Britons the idea of putting a king's head on coins. So I'm especially grateful to them.
Throughout the royal tour, the palace has repeatedly said there were no plans for King Charles to meet with Pope Francis. But from the moment the pontiff appeared in public, they couldn't rule out the chance the leaders of both churches would meet.